by making those comparisons, I do believe those are fair comparisons, and Canadians need to really wake up and see the actual, the gravity of these vaccine passports and the detriment it's going to bring to all citizens in our country, especially on our most basic and fundamental rights and freedoms. So it's just hypocritical. They're trying everything they can do, as I said, to discount the PPC, and we're a force to be reckoned with. We're just continuing to grow our movement. We are the only party that's standing up and fighting for our fundamental rights and freedoms in Canada. And I think there's going to be some very pleasant surprises for the People's Party of Canada and freedom-loving Canadians come Monday, September 20th.
Warning, censorship.
Well, Renate Siekmann, the PPC candidate for the riding of Vancouver Quadra, recently distributed a pamphlet that has sent members of the media and the usual suspects into such a feeding frenzy it would make a school of tiger sharks blush. Now, the pamphlet features photos of Indigenous children in front of residential schools. The copy reads, quote, "Discrimination is wrong," end quote, and, quote, "No vaccine passports," end quote. Well, cue the outrage. A global news story is headlined, "Calls Mount for Ouster of PPC Candidate Who Compared Vaccine Mandate to Residential Schools." Not to be outdone, CBC ranted, "PPC Candidate Denounced for Harmful and Repugnant Comparison of Vaccine Cards to Residential Schools." Wow, that's harsh. Look, vaccine passports and residential schools, these are two very different issues, to be sure, but there is some common ground. Both were or are wrong. So did Ms. Siekmann really deliver literature that is truly repugnant? Well, joining me now to further discuss this alleged outrage is the PPC candidate for Brantford-Brant, and that would be Cole Squire. Good day to you, sir.
Good day, David. Thank you for having me on to discuss some of these issues.
Well, it is a pleasure. And of course, I met you the other day outside the CBC, or the Ministry of Truth, as I like to call it. And I really enjoyed our interview. But I think, Cole, you are very well positioned to weigh in on this issue. First of all, you are indeed a PPC candidate for the riding of Brantford-Brant. And secondly, you're a member of the Six Nations community. So right off the bat, did your colleague, Ms. Siekmann, did she really do something repugnant in distributing those pamphlets?
Absolutely not. I think those are, as you mentioned, they're very different subjects, but when you look at the principles and the premises of what these types of policies and legislation do, very similar, eerily similar, Frank. And this is another act of segregation within our country. What was happened to these children in these residential schools was absolutely egregious. Nobody today would argue anything different from that. But with these vaccine passports, we're seeing this. The PPC, we're not pro-vax, or we're not against them or for them. It's up to the individual to make the best choice for the not against the vaccination. We're pro-choice when it comes to this issue. So with these vaccine passports, however, this is creating two tiers of citizens within our society. And we can't allow this to happen. Segregation is wrong. We can't change our history. We can only learn from it. That's what we need to do.
Indeed, and of course, you know, Cole, I'm not telling tales out of school here by saying the vast majority of the mainstream media, it is left of center. There are so many progressives employed in that industry, and they used to have, you know, subscribe to sayings such as "my body, my choice," at least when it applied to the abortion debate, when it came to a woman terminating the life of a baby. They used to subscribe to reasonable accommodation when it came to outreach to accommodating minority groups. And yet it seems to me, Cole, that in 2021, my body, my choice and reasonable accommodation, those are not phrases uttered anymore by the left or anyone else for that matter.
Exactly. The left and the woke establishment, they're completely silent on this issue. That they like to preach around my body, my choice with the abortion. But when it comes to making your own full informed medical decisions, they're nowhere to be found with it. They're complete hypocrites, as is with most of the policy.
And of course, in the media articles condemning Ms. Siekmann, they have reached out to the BC Assembly of First Nations. They are officially calling on Ms. Siekmann to be removed as a candidate. But I have to tell you, Cole, I think there's a difference between those who speak for Native organizations, the official spokespeople of these organizations, and what Natives on the reserve actually think. And I compare it to, for example, 2016, the Washington Post, they did a survey, a poll, exclusively to Native Americans about the nickname and logo of the Washington Redskins. And much to their shock, I am sure, more than 90% of exclusively American natives said, we have no problem with the logo or the nickname. In fact, it's a badge of honor. Yet, when you speak to the official Native organizations, they think that's a hate crime. So what I'm saying, do you get that feeling too, what the individual Natives of Canada think and what their organizations state are often two different kettles of fish?
Absolutely. There's a huge disconnect between what actual First Nations people in our country think versus what these establishments in our First Nations reserves are saying. The same can be said about the pipelines. There's a lot of rhetoric of our First Nations people not wanting these to proceed. They bring environmental issues, environmental racism, which I've also heard, which is. And the thing is, with these pipelines, they employ a lot of our First Nations people, and the economic benefits and revenues that bring in to our communities are extremely helpful. And for them to be trying to use these loud-speaking people, the phrase like "squeaky wheel will get the grease." And so I'm finding it's just a lot of parroting and doublespeak, and it does not accurately reflect a lot of the ideologies with our.
You raise a fantastic point, Cole. I was in Gatineau, Quebec last week for the leader debates, the French and the English one, and it was very perversely ironic, I thought. All of them were pro-truth and reconciliation when it came to justice for the residential school issue, when it came to clean drinking water for those reserves that have boil advisories, which to me is just incredible in this day and age when Canada is in the 21st century and we have the largest reserves of fresh water in the world. And yet, they were all against the oil industry, all coming up with thoughts for carbon taxes, canceling yet more projects. And yet there are thousands and thousands of Natives that are in the energy sector that have very good paying jobs. So it seems like they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. On one hand, they want to help Natives, and on the other hand, they're canceling energy projects that already help Natives. Can you make sense of this, Cole?
It's absolutely absurd. But these things too, they're total hypocrites, and the disconnect. So a lot of our band councils, they need to be helped. This clean drinking water issue we've been hearing about for decades. It's not a new problem. The money is there. Our federal government's paying upwards of $24 billion in federal government taxpayers. $24 billion for our First Nations reserves in Canada. And we do not see any type of improvement to the infrastructure, the housing, the water needs in these communities. So as I said, there needs to be accountability on both sides of the aisle. Federal government's wrongdoing. It's also the backbone. As I said, the money's there, the priorities are not. So we need to make sure that both sides of the aisle are doing what's best for the people and not just continuing to work for this local establishment.
100%. And going back to Ms. Siekmann, what do you think her fate will be? Will your leader, Maxime Bernier, will he disqualify her as a candidate because the media is so outraged? Because I look back a week ago, there was a Conservative candidate. I have an exclusive interview coming up with her, Lisa Robinson, in Beaches, East York. She was the victim of a smear campaign by false social media postings that her enemies put in her name. And I can tell you, Cole, in the morning of last Friday, Aaron O'Toole and his camp said, "We got your back, Lisa. We're going to fight this. We're going to get justice." And by Friday night, they said, "You better resign or we're going to have to fire you." Evidently, the deluge of media calls made them bend the knee. So what do you think Maxime Bernier is going to do in regard to Ms. Siekmann?
Well, unlike the other parties, the PPC allows us candidates to be able to really on a lot of matters which other parties were seeing them be expelled from the caucus and removed from cabinet positions or that. So, as I said, I don't think what Ms. Siekmann said was something that would be worthy of her expelled from the People's Party. We don't condone any type of violence. By making those comparisons, I do believe those are fair comparisons, and Canadians need to really wake up and see the actual the gravity of these vaccine passports and the detriment it's going to bring to all citizens in our country, especially on our most basic and fundamental rights and freedoms. So I think they're being removed at all. As I said, to my knowledge, there was no types of calls for violent action or anything like that. Yeah. So as I said, I can't see anything like that happening.
How refreshing to hear that there is a right-of-center leader like Maxime Bernier who has a spine, who will not capitulate to the hackles of the mainstream media, who basically hate everything that is right of center. And we'll leave it with this, Cole. I mentioned this briefly to you off camera. This morning, I'm driving into the office. I have AM 640 on. I'm listening to Alan Carter. He had a great story topic, which was the unexpected surge in the polls of the PPC nationwide. And stay tuned for my guest to weigh in on this. And then I was absolutely shocked to see that the guest weighing in on this was Dr. Barbara Perry. She is with the Center on Hate, Bias, and Extremism. Cole, why in the world would you have a person, whose specialty is hate, bias, and extremism weighing in on the rise in the polls of the PPC? Your initials are PPC, not KKK. What do you have to say to that, my friend?
It's a part of the cancel culture, and you know what? They tried to ignore the PPC and act like we don't exist. They'll call us a white supremacist, far-right fringe group. Even today at a pop-up event, I was called a white supremacist. I'm like, I'm a First Nations person. And once you tell these people that, like, the group of white people in the People's Party of Canada, we have people from all walks and backgrounds of life. So it's just hypocritical. They're trying everything they can do, as I said, to discount the PPC, and we're a force to be reckoned with. We're just continuing to grow our movement. We are the only party that's standing up and fighting for our fundamental rights and freedoms in Canada. And I think there's going to be some very pleasant surprises for the People's Party of Canada and freedom-loving Canadians come Monday, September 20th.
Wow. Well, Cole, I mean, it was a pleasure speaking with you. I can't believe anyone had the audacity to call you a white supremacist, and yet maybe this is someone who's voting Liberal, and that party is led by a prime minister who bills himself as an anti-racist feminist, yet has worn blackface so many times he doesn't know how many times it's been, and groped a female reporter on the West Coast several years ago. Unbelievable. Well, Cole, Monday is just 3 days away. I wish you luck, my friend, and I hope we'll get a chance to reconvene on other issues. Thank you so much for joining me today, my friend.
Thank you, David. I look forward to it.
And there you go, folks. That was Cole Squire. He is the People's Party of Canada candidate in Brantford-Brant. Well, folks, can you believe it? Less than a week to go before the federal election. Tell me, do you trust what the mainstream media is reporting? I sure don't. Therefore, if you can, please go to realreporters.ca. That's realreporters.ca. If you're able to, kindly make a donation so that Rebel News can continue to bring you the other side of the story.